What am I doing?
All right, there's gonna be rules on this trip. Number one, do exactly as I say all the time. Got it?
Got it, Donut Lord.
Would you stop with the Donut Lord? I have a name, it's Tom.
I'm Sonic.
Sonic. Sonic. So you've been spying on us all for years.
I mean, I wouldn't call it spying. We were all just hanging out, only I wasn't invited and no one knew I was there.
I can't believe Crazy Carl was right all this time.
Yeah, you should call him Super Observant Carl instead. Oh my God, stop the car right now!
What?
The world's largest rubber band ball? We gotta see it!
No, this is not some fun family road trip, okay? The government wants to dissect you and arrest me. This is serious.
You're right. It was lame. Gift shop was cool, though. I got you a mouse pad. When are we gonna get there?
We will get there when we get there.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, welcoming a new guest and a fellow comic creator, and fellow podcaster, and that's Lyndsey Little. Lyndsey, how you doing today?
I am doing great. I'm a little sleep deprived, but I can't complain otherwise. It's so nice to be here. Also, you have such a powerful name.
Thank you. It is real. It's not fake. It actually is.
It's very good. Perry Constantine.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Short for Thank you. But anyway, welcome to the show, and I'm glad to have you on. And before we get started talking about the movie, let's talk a little bit about yourself. Why don't you tell the guests a little bit about yourself, what you do, tell them about your podcast and your comics.
Sure. So I'm an illustrator, and my primary passion is my comic Oni Girl. I've had it for a few years now, but I recently had to go on hiatus. I'm trying to bring it back, and I'm trying to bring it back in full color. So I have that going on, but you can go back and read up to chapter 4 on the Webtoon Canvas, and I have 6,000 subscribed readers. So that is hopefully a good indicator of how many people like it. Maybe you'll like it too. I have a Kickstarter going on to sort of refurbish those old pages, color them, make them shiny and new. And Kickstarter has named it a project that they love, so that's somebody else that you can believe in the opinion of, and maybe give you further reason to check out my comics. I also co-host a podcast called Stories to Dismember, very similarly to this podcast, where we review horror films, except we do it in a more silly fashion. Or honestly, my co-hosts and I, all three of us, are very silly. But we do try to recap the film from beginning to end and then leave it with our final reviews. Actually, the three of us were wondering if you ever wanted to do a crossover episode, because there's some
I
love
superhero
movies out there. Yeah.
I do. We have done a few here already, so we'll talk a little bit more off mic. But I think we could definitely find something to work on together.
Awesome.
Either this, or we had also talked before, because I'm bringing back my Japanese film podcast as well. So we could also talk about that off mic a little bit more. That's finally moving along. So that's I'll tell you guys more about that later. But Japan on Film is going to be coming back, it looks like. But anyway, let's talk a little bit more. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit more about Oni Girl, and what was kind of your inspiration for this? Because I read the first few episodes of chapter 1, and obviously the anime influence is clear, right? So what were kind of some of the things that you were drawing on when you were creating this comic?
Sure. Well, visually, I think visually I was inspired by manga, of course, as you observed. But I also grew up reading Archie comics and Sonic the Hedgehog comics, which is very relevant to our episode today.
Mm-hmm.
But from a writing standpoint, even though it's a fantasy story involving monster students going to a school, learning how to assimilate the behavior and appearance of humans in order to survive in human society, the real root of it is based in dealing with anxiety and trauma, and overall it's about the journey to self-love. And I use monsters as an allegory for anybody who feels marginalized or as an other, which I think you will see a lot in any kind of media. And honestly,
Hmm.
like, so many good movies and stories involve uh, that idea. Like, my favorite Disney movie is Beauty and the Beast, and the Beast is,
Hmm.
he's an other. I grew up watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles over and over. I was very sad, by the way, that that was already covered because that would have been my first. Um, but those, again, are another great example of that, the mutant Ninja Turtles who, they
Hmm.
go out and they still live amongst humans, and they fight for humanity. I just love that. So that's something that I try to bring
Yeah.
into my work.
Yeah. If you ever listen to that episode, one of the things that was really interesting about that first movie, the 1991, is it still holds up really
It
well. Like
does.
effects wise, story wise, it holds up amazingly well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff, I was tracking a lot of that stuff that you were saying. I mean, you know, TMNT, obviously, X-Men. I got into comics
Mm,
and all this stuff basically through X-Men, right? And that's
mm,
basically, if you feel like a freak, then that's a good thing, type of thing. It was kind of
mm,
like the message of that comic book and like the animated series and all that stuff. But also Buffy, right? The whole idea of like horror as a metaphor for high school was, the big through
mm.
line in those early seasons.
Yeah, it's the
And
angstiest
then
time of any of our lives, trying to figure out who we
exactly,
are, where
yeah.
our place is in the world.
Yeah, yeah. I still think back. It's been a long time, but I still have memories of those times, and every now and then I'm like, oh God, that was bad.
Mm.
That was bad.
Yeah, totally. I think
So
whenever I oh, sorry. I was just
sorry, go
going to
ahead. Go
say
ahead. No, no, go ahead, go ahead.
it's it's one of those things where when you're laying in bed at night and those dark thoughts creep in, all of your
Hmm.
regrets from 10 years ago or even earlier, like, I feel like usually it ends up being high school memories, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
pretty much almost exclusively. So how's the Kickstarter been going so far? Because I know you got a lot of subscribers on Webtoons, like you mentioned.
Yeah,
How's this
it's
Kickstarter been doing?
well, this is my first Kickstarter, and it currently is one third of the way to the goal, which is great. And there's
Nice.
23 days to go still. So it ends February 14th. So hopefully by then it will be fully funded. Um, it seems like it's going at a good pace, but I
Hmm.
am an anxious person. So I just
Yeah.
assume it will fail until otherwise. But a lot of people
Part of the
seem to
reason why I
believe in
haven't
it.
done one
So
myself.
It's
Yeah,
scary.
it is. Yeah, yeah. Like I do. I'm working on my own comic book now, and I do comic book work for lettering work for another publisher. But when it comes to trying to fund something of my own, working with another artist or something, I'm always
Mm.
so terrified of doing it. If I don't have that control over whether or not it gets published, it's scary for
Mhm.
me. I definitely feel that.
Mm. I would love to learn more about your
Now,
comic.
oh well, we could talk about that more once we finish up with the episode. But yeah, I'd be happy
Sure.
to tell you about it. It's not even finished yet. So but it's just something I'm starting to get into. But anyway, now I'm looking at your bio here too, and it says that you've worked for gaming sites, and you've also worked on two existing published graphic novels as well. So why don't you tell me a little
Yes.
bit about your artistic career in general?
Sure. So for many years, I did illustrations for what they call virtual pet sites. And the primary one was for Tattered World, which is still going strong. I did work for them for 5 or 6 years, so there are thousands and thousands of illustrations that I did for them. But I did work for other pet sites as well. And to explain what a virtual pet site is, just for anybody who might be confused by that because it does sound very strange. The simplest way I can explain it is it's very similar to Neopets. It's the same idea where there's a virtual character that you take care of, that you feed or quote unquote read books to, and just
Hmm.
help it evolve. Or there's different iterations on what a virtual pet site is depending on the virtual pet site. But I did that for a long time. And I started making my way into comic books a few years ago. I did flats. I did some flatting work for Open Borders, The Science and Ethics of Immigration by Brian Kaplan and Zach Wiener-Smith. And I've done flatting work for other people as well. But that book for Open Borders was sort of a dream come true for me because in high school, I grew up reading Zach Wiener-Smith's comics. He
Oh,
writes
nice.
Saturday morning breakfast cereal. So that was just, oh my gosh, unbelievable to be able to do work for somebody I grew up admiring. Um,
Yeah, I can imagine.
mm, but there's nothing like working on your own passion project. It's fulfilling in a whole other level, which I'm sure you completely understand.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, like I like doing the work for hire stuff. Helps pay the bills
Mm,
sometimes, but but yeah, working on my own stuff is definitely a whole other thing. Um,
mm,
so like one of the things about the old axiom, never meet your heroes type of thing.
mm-hmm.
How did the expectation go with the reality of actually working with him?
Well, I never got to work directly for him. I was sort of
Okay.
subcontracted by another artist I admire who was doing the coloring work for. But
Hmm.
we follow each other on Twitter, and anytime I've asked for a little boost, such as this recent Kickstarter, he's been more than glad to help uh, promote what I'm working on, which is so lovely of him because
Hmm.
nobody has to do that for you, but for somebody to do that with such a high level of esteem that he has, it's so nice. Um,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I've kind of noticed about comics against versus like pretty much any other medium. Like if you talk about film or even novels, even like there's
Hmm.
when you get to a certain level, there's a little bit more like I'm not sure what the right word is, but almost like
Disconnect or
disconnect. Yeah, kind of like that, where they're less willing to help. But comics, it seems different. Like even people who have worked for the big two or have had lots of success in comics. I mean, you'll get your occasional diva here and there, but for the
mm,
most part, it's a much more egalitarian, much more open community, I think.
mm, yeah, I can see that. I just it's a much more supportive community, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I
Mm.
think so too. Yeah. um, so let's talk a little bit about your background as well, because you'd mentioned Archie Comics and Sonic and also Open Borders and Zach Wiener Smith stuff. Were those kind of like your big entry points into like geekdom or comic books in general?
As far as the work goes, yes, but I grew up reading comics. I like from comic strips to comic books, and
Hmm.
I know I chose Sonic as the movie to discuss, but I did go through a big superhero phase when I was in high school.
Hmm.
Um, I had this group of friends that was obsessed with superhero comics, so I started reading Batman, Superman, um, some Spider-Man, but primarily DC comics.
Hmm.
And really, really got into Teen Titans. I was obsessed. Um, and I think that really stemmed from childhood, like a very young
Hmm.
age, when I went into some sort of Dollar General esque store that had uh, floppies in a little package, like 2 or 3
Mhm.
floppies in a package that you could buy for $1, and I bought that. And one of them was the Starfire, the original Starfire, what would you call it? Sort of like a mini
First
series.
appearance? Oh,
First,
miniseries. Okay, okay.
not
Or
a first appearance,
standalone or
but it
something?
was, yeah, it was that George Perez, Marv Wolfman sort of spin-off where they
Okay.
gave like a little spotlight on each of the Teen Titans, the new Teen Titans. And
Okay.
I read the Starfire one, and I loved her character so much. I and to this day I still love her character. She's still my favorite
Mhm.
superhero because, and there's so many great ones. But
Mhm.
I love her because I identify with her so much, just her passion for life and her love of people. I
Mhm.
To my knowledge, there's not a character like that. It's what her whole race is all about. And
Mhm.
I identified with that so much. And uh, I still, even though I stopped reading superhero comics for a long time, uh, I have such a huge place in my heart for Starfire, um,
Mhm.
and for DC Comics in general. But uh, yeah, that's, even though my life has sort of gone in a different direction, where I
Mhm.
probably read more manga now these days, uh, I can't forget my roots.
Mhm. Very cool. Yeah, there's a lot of that, kind of sticking with the one who brought you to the dance mentality in a way. I've noticed. Like me, I came in with Marvel, and even though I love DC, I read a ton of DC stuff. Like my instinct is always to kind of gravitate towards Marvel as a result. And I found the
Mm.
same thing with other people. Whatever they start with, whether it's Marvel, whether it's DC, whether it's Image, even they kind of their instinct is always kind of to gravitate towards that first one.
Mm. And it might
N-
be that I would actually really love more Marvel comics if I just had the opportunity to read more.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
which maybe I will. Maybe I will when I have the time and am not
Yeah.
so focused on my own comic.
I mean, between all the stuff I do, plus, the two kids, I don't
Mm.
have a lot of time to read a lot of comic books, which is why my Comixology unread books are like, in the triple or maybe even quadruple digits at the moment. um, all right, so let's move into talking about the movie, which we had an interesting little back and forth. I hope you don't mind me sharing a little bit.
You can if
um,
you want, because I think
okay,
it's kind of funny.
I think so too. Because you'd initially when we first started talking, I asked you if you wanted to come
Uh,
on the show, and I gave you the list of stuff we'd already covered, and you actually suggested Birdman, and I thought that was an interesting choice because I'd seen Birdman, and I'm like,
uh,
oh, okay, so I think maybe she's kind of interested in talking about like kind of the themes about because a lot of it's very semi-autobiographical about Michael Keaton trying to break away from having played
mm,
Batman and all that.
yeah.
There's a lot of that worked in the movie, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess she's interested in talking about that kind of stuff.
On a whole
And then
other.
yesterday, you, yeah, you sent me a message. You're like, this movie was not what I thought.
Absolutely true. I chose that movie with no concept of what it was other than it was Michael Keaton as a superhero, but I didn't realize that it was actually way more layers than that. He doesn't actually play a superhero.
Mhm.
He plays a man who played a superhero. And the story
Yeah.
is so much more than that. And it was a
But
great
then
movie.
it is a
It
great movie.
was.
It is, yeah.
But
I mean, that was one of the movies where I'm like, mm, okay, well, I guess it's kind of related. We can work with it. We've
uh-huh.
pushed the boundaries on this show a few times, so it's so I was willing to roll along with it. But then you were kind of nervous about doing it and asked if we could do something else. So instead, you chose Sonic the Hedgehog, the
Yes.
2020 live action version. And you had mentioned you had read Sonic comics as a kid.
Mm.
But what kind of was that? How you first got interested in Sonic? Was it the comics, or were you a gamer as a kid as well?
It was the comics. I grew up in a very rural area. I don't know if you can tell from the accent, but and we also grew up kind of poor. So
Hmm.
it was a long time before I had access to video games, and the only comics I ever had access to were what you could find in the Sunday newspaper, the Sunday Funnies,
Hmm.
or the comics that you could get at the local grocery store. So primarily
Right.
what I read were the Archie comics and Sonic the Hedgehog, and every now and then I would shake it up with something like the Punisher.
Which
So
all
there was
totally gels together.
yeah. It's always about good and evil, right?
Hmm.
Even in the Archie
I mean,
comics. Yeah, sure.
the Punisher did cross over with Archie at one point, so there was that.
Oh my gosh, you're right. That's
Yeah, yeah.
crazy.
Okay, so you
Wow, I
got
can't
in through
believe
the
I haven't
comics
read that
then.
one.
Y- yeah, it. I've never read it either, but I do know it exists. I do know it. Like it, I think some people might think of it as an urban legend, but no,
Mm.
it exists. It was actually punished back during the heyday when like the Punisher was at the height of his popularity. They did Marvel and Archie did a crossover. I've never read it, so I don't know what it's like or
What
not.
was the thought process there?
I guess it
That's
was
so
just
funny.
90s, this is popular, let's milk it as much as we can mentality because that's what that was going on a lot back then.
Mm.
Um so, you were a fan of the comic books. Like me, I'd played the Sonic games a little bit, but I think actually what my
Mm.
introduction to Sonic was really the Saturday morning TV show. Like there were two different TV shows back at the time.
Mm.
There was one that was a little bit more like geared towards younger kids. It was a little bit more tongue in cheek,
Mhm.
where Tails was like in every episode, um, and then there was another one which was a little bit more of like the edgier animation that was kind of coming out of the time. It was the storytelling was a little
Mm.
bit more adult, more in the vein of like you know uh, X Men or Batman the Animated Series, where they were like freedom fighters type of thing against the kind of like
Yeah.
a lot of stuff like that going on. Yeah. Um, and I remember as a kid, watching them both and really loving the more mature one. I think it was ABC that did that
Hmm.
one, whereas the
Hmm.
other one, which I think was the precursor to UPN, at least in my area, that had that one on. And that one I didn't like as much, but I really loved the more mature one. How about you? Did you watch any of those shows?
So, the edgier one you describe, I never watched. That sounds very good. I grew
Hmm.
up watching the other one that you mentioned, the babier one.
Hmm.
And to be fair, I was very, very young when I watched that one before school in the mornings, and I
Hmm.
was elementary school age. It was right up my alley then. As an adult, I tried rewatching those just a few years back, and I even took an edible to watch it with, just in case, to see if it would make it better. But no, there was no saving it. It was not a
Hmm.
fun time. Yeah, the Saturday morning Sonic, not so good. But that edgier one, I never
Hmm.
watched that one. That sounds great though. That sounds like it would be way more entertaining.
It was good. I think it was on one of the streaming services at one point. I'm not sure if it still is, but it's definitely worth tracking down. I was, yeah, my memories of that actually are still pretty fresh. In fact, I think that's where the whole chili dog thing started, if I'm not mistaken, when he has
Really?
the chili dog
Okay.
reference. I think I'm not 100% sure, so I'm sure someone on the internet will correct me if I'm wrong on that. Um, but, uh, but yeah, I think I probably would have at the time. I think I probably would have liked the the more the more cartoony one a little bit more if I didn't have that other one as a comparison point of comparison.
Hmm.
But when you had those both, then it was very clear like which one was the better one.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
So, what did you feel about this? Did you see this movie when it came out?
I didn't see it immediately when it came out, but I did. I had seen it. I watched it last year. I watched it last
Hmm.
year. Um, and I watched it again just before this record, so this was my second time watching it. and I had a lot of thoughts.
Hmm.
Um, it was it was vaguely what I remembered it being like with my first time watching it. I do feel like it's definitely targeted more towards kids than adults.
Hmm.
But there's enough adult, not content, so to speak, but humor to keep an adult interested. Like
Hmm.
for an adult with kids, for example, like you, like maybe this is the perfect movie to watch with younger kids because it can keep everybody entertained. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like if you I feel like it's a great movie to keep your sanity as a parent, maybe, rather than allowing your kids to watch something that you know you're going to get sick of. This seems like a good
Hmm.
alternative, and I'm curious to know if your 2-year-old likes this movie. Um, but yeah, I thought it was cute. I give it a solid
Hmm.
cute. This
Hmm.
movie.
Um, Helena's a little bit too young to really pay attention to anything that's
Mm.
she doesn't pay attention really to anything yet. Like mostly she just likes flashy visuals
Uh
and
huh.
music. She's big into music. That's mainly her
Ah,
things. So
it's
like
probably
she
better.
watches like Mickey Mouse. Yeah, she watches like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, and she'll watch that for like 10 or 15 minutes at a time. Um, but mostly I think she just likes the sound more than anything else. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, every now and then she loves theme songs, especially like
Oh,
the Simpsons theme song. She loves that one. She loves the X-Files theme song. She loves the Peacemaker theme song. So she went apeshit
wow.
over the Peacemaker theme song every time it started playing.
That's
Um,
so
so yeah,
cute.
so she's
Maybe
not
she'll be a
quite at the stage
composer
yet
one day.
where
Hmm.
she might, who knows? But she's not really at the stage yet where she's, willing to sit and absorb story so much. She's getting there a little bit. Now she's starting to sit down more and actually listen when we read her
Mm.
stories and stuff like that. So she's slowly getting to that point. I think maybe within this year or next year, she'll probably start being able to sit down and actually watch a TV show as opposed to just listening to it. Um,
Mm.
uh, but yeah, I'm can't remember if she was actually born or not when I saw this for the first time because I didn't see it in theaters, but I did see it when it first came on streaming, and I remember the concept of it, and when we were because the whole curse of video game movies, right, is obviously big whenever one of these things comes up, and in the lead up to this movie. And when I saw the trailers, I mean, first off, there was the whole controversy about the design. I'm not sure if you know about that.
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
absolutely. We have to discuss that.
So yeah, yeah. So anyone who doesn't remember, there was this whole thing about the original design of the character of Sonic, and it was just eviscerated on Twitter, and it was for good reason. It was a pretty friggin' ugly design.
Yeah, I think most
um,
people were in agreement about that.
mhm. And like it didn't have any fur or something at least in the beginning, and they
Strangely
even made a
human
joke
teeth.
about it. Strangely human teeth, yeah, and the eyes were a little bit too small. And it actually had a cameo in the Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers movie as well. I hear
That's right, yeah.
because they'd done a lot of like tongue in cheek stuff about CGI characters in that. I
Mm.
haven't seen that movie yet, but I'm curious to see it just for that, if nothing else.
Same.
Um, and then after that, Sony came out with a redesign pretty quickly,
Who
and it was a
I think
much.
Tyson Hesse was the one who was the main guy behind the redesign for it.
Mhm.
Who also
Yes,
is
yeah.
in comics.
Yeah, yeah. It says he had worked on previous Sonic the Hedgehog media.
Mm,
He had given the larger eyes, changed the color of him, new shoes, gave him the white gloves, and also made the body look a little bit closer to what it was in the video game. And overall, I think he nailed it. Like
I think
maybe a
so
little bit
too.
too tall, I think, but otherwise, I think it's a
Mm.
very very representative of that character.
Yeah, I think it's the perfect balance of 3D with some of the 2D characteristics from the original Sonic.
Hmm.
Um, and it just strikes a really good balance because before the original design they had, it was that uncanny valley that you get from the kind of like the Cats musical, like the live
Hmm.
action version of the Cats musical. It was that level of creepiness and weirdness. But yeah, Tyson Hesse really saved us there with that Sonic redesign. It's so much better.
Yeah. The best thing about the Cats movie were the reviews. I will say. I'm not
Yes.
sure if you've ever like I never saw the movie, but
Really?
Derek, my late co-host, he did see it, and he is like, I wish I
Uh,
did not see that.
yeah,
um,
I saw it in theaters with my partner and two of our friends. Going in, we knew it was going to be bad, so we got exactly what we
mhm.
expected.
Now that sounds like something you should definitely consume a handful of edibles before watching.
You know what? It's on my Amazon wish list for that very reason.
But I was a little bit, even with the improved animation and stuff, I was still a little bit nervous about this movie because of the like.
Mm,
I'm someone who, I don't worry too much about advanced news releases or press or like I'm or even like internet chatter about it. Like I'm always willing to give something a chance. So
mm,
even when everybody was complaining about this movie, even like I sat through the redesign, I'm like, all right, it's not my thing, but whatever. And then when they came with the new one, I'm
mm.
like, okay, this looks much better. I'm willing to give this a shot. Um, but there was also still a little part of me that was kind of nervous because I had those memories of that ABC show, and
Mhm.
I was thinking, I'm like, wow, it seems kind of a waste to bring Sonic into the regular Earth type of thing, right? I thought it was
Yeah.
like what's that really do for the character? Wouldn't it be more interesting to see that the world that he inhabits and all that, and see how they run with that? Um, and because it felt kind of like the old Masters of the Universe movie, where instead of having it set on Eternia, where they're in this fantasy world, they bring He-Man and Skeletor and everyone onto Earth in the '80s, and it's like this isn't really what we wanted when we said we wanted a He-Man movie. So I was thinking
Yeah.
kind of like that at first. Go ahead.
Oh, no, no, I'm just in agreement here.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you had something to add to that. So I was a little bit nervous going in, and then when I actually sat down and watched it, I'm like, this is pretty damn good. Like I think they did a really
Mm.
good job with this.
I'm on board with you 100% there. I also didn't know how they were going to work with that, but the way that they reframed um Sonic, and I mean, I guess technically he always was an alien because he does come from a different planet, but we've just never seen him
Hmm.
on our planet. So it was interesting to see how they uh used that and accentuated it, really. Like they refer
Hmm.
to him as an alien kind of throughout the movie. um
Right.
and they found ways to make it work. And it's kind of cute sometimes, like seeing our world through Sonic's eyes, like the parts of Earth that make it fun and interesting.
Hmm.
um Basically through the lens of a child. Like he Sonic is kind of a kid, and he looks at our world in childlike wonder. So there's
Hmm.
some charm to that as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really helps sell that is the fact that is Ben Schwartz's performance as him.
Mm.
Like I only knew Ben Schwartz from Parks and Recreation. So when they
Mm.
said he was the guy who was doing Sonic, I'm like, really, that guy? Um, but he knocked it out of the park. I thought like he was. I thought he perfectly captured when I think of Sonic. That's basically that kind of personality that I think of, and I think Ben
Yes.
Schwartz really brought that to the character. And like you were saying, with that kind of youthful exuberance and like how amazed he is at all this kind of stuff, um, that stuff that those are the moments I think when Schwartz really shines. Like I really believed
Mhm.
that he really was interested in all this stuff too.
Absolutely. He seems like the kind of person who's a kid at heart. Like you see that in his Parks and Rec performances, and it definitely
Hmm.
shines through this Sonic character.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was also very impressed with James Marsden's performance as Tom too. Like I think James Marsden is one of the most underrated actors. I think he got, totally robbed in the X-Men films. He was great in Westworld, which now unfortunately
Mm.
got canceled as well. And he was really good in this, and it shows just how versatile he is because he's able to do like, these more serious, more dramatic roles, but he's also able to just kind of like, cut loose and be funny in this. Like he had some great lines in this. Like I love the part when he talks about his dentist who calls him Tim.
Yeah, that was cute. That's one of those lines that is maybe more for the adults than kid.
Mhm.
Honestly, no. I feel like kids could maybe appreciate that too. But it's just one of those moments that I was like, all right, this is pretty funny. This is pretty good.
It also got me because I definitely had those moments when I've been working with someone for years, and then all of a sudden one day you realize, shit, I don't know this guy's name, and now it's too late to ask.
Very relatable.
Very relatable, yeah. Um, and also the relationship he has with Maddie, Tika Sumter, that was another really nice
Mm,
thing. A little,
very
and the
cute.
whole, yeah, and the little like little sibling-in-law rivalry he has with her sister. I thought that was also really well done. I mean,
Hmm.
um, Natasha Rothwell, she did a great job in that role too, as the sister.
But I think what makes that work is how supportive they are of each other as a couple. Because
Hmm.
it's so overdone, the rocky relationships. I feel like we
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
leave that behind in 90s sitcoms. Just like leave that behind a
Hmm.
little bit, because unless like you're doing something that is relationship drama, like, but this is like a fun Sonic movie. You don't need that here. And it was so refreshing to see that couple and how they handled this blue alien situation together.
Hmm.
It was great.
One of my favorite go-tos, talking about couples in these unusual situations and how storytelling is kind of matured on that, is Superman and Lois. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that show. Um,
Oh,
but just
no.
the it's really good. And just like the depiction, one of my favorite moments is from the first season when, because in the show they're married, they have kids, so there's no like, Lois doesn't know that Clark and Superman are the same person type thing. None of that in there.
Right.
But one of my favorite episodes, one of my favorite moments is excuse me, she asks Clark to go to this town hall meeting because she can't go because she's
Mm.
got to do some other investigation. And he's like, "Yeah, I'll go. I'll take notes for you. I'll take care of everything. No problem." And then something happens as Superman, and he has to go and take care of this other thing. And then he comes back and he tells her, and he's like, "I'm so sorry. I was gonna try and go, but I just something came up." And she's like, "Look, I get you're Superman. I get you were saving lives, and I get it's irrational, but I'm still pissed off, and so I just got to be
Yeah.
alone for a minute." And I'm like, that's a great way of dealing with it. That's a great way of explaining it. Because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, logically if and it because in most times you'd see her be like you'd show Lois as being pissed off at that, like well
Mm.
you made a promise, then you broke your promise, and us as the audience, we'd usually be like, yeah, but he was saving a bus full of kids. What do
Mm.
you want him to do?
Yeah, yeah,
But I thought
yeah.
this was a nice way of explaining that. Well, like, look, she understands, but there's also that illogical part of you that's still like, well, you broke your promise. So I think that was a really good way of
Yeah.
handling it.
That sounds,
And
you've sold me on that show because that sounds great. Because that is such a
I've sold
real
so many people on
scenario.
just that moment. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
That's
is.
very good.
And I think you're right about the relationship he has with Maddie, because that scene when he comes in with Sonic and everything, and she's taking care of him, and then she's like, let's go
Mm.
talk. And she's like, okay, I think you can agree that I've been very cool about this up until
Yeah.
now. And he's like, yeah, you've been very cool. You've been crushing. She's like,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
yeah,
Now what the hell's going on?
yeah. Also, she's a veterinarian, but she's never worked with this kind of anatomy before. What does he
Mhm.
expect her to do?
But yeah, I love that too. When he's like, well, you're a vet. She's like, yeah, a vet who works with animals. Like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah, it was very good.
So I want to talk about Jim Carrey's performance in this movie.
Mm.
What were your thoughts about Jim Carrey as Robotnik?
I think when the movie was first announced, I was just very curious about how they were going to make that work, because
Hmm.
he, even with whatever prosthetics you would put on him, I couldn't imagine how they could make him look like the Dr. Robotnik that you know from the comics, or the
Hmm.
cartoons or the games. And
Hmm.
they, I think, knocked it out of the park with how they reimagined him, uh, in every which way. And honestly, I
Hmm.
think he was my favorite part about the whole movie. He was just so good. Um, and I don't know if who they could have gotten to do it other than Jim Carrey. Like, he's just such a great character
Hmm.
actor. And really funny that there's two superhero actors in this movie, at least, like, because the guy that plays Tom, he was
He was
uh
Cyclops. Yeah, yeah.
right, and then Jim Carrey was the Riddler,
Hmm.
and I don't
And
remember
well,
which
actually, you've
Batman
got
movie that
three.
was.
Yeah, it was Batman Forever. Also, you've got Neil McDonough, who plays the General. He was in the first Captain America movie. He was Dugan, the
Oh,
guy with the
cool.
mustache. And he also played a villain on the CW shows. He was in Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow as well. Um, I can't remember his name on that, but I
Hey,
had a
you
little bit.
still
I had a
have a mind
slightly.
like a. I was gonna say you still have a mind like a steel trap.
Thank you. Just I've got all this useless knowledge of superhero media, and there's no room for anything else as a result.
That's great.
But with Jim Carrey's performance, I was a little bit more mixed on it. For the most part,
Mm,
I think I liked it. But
mm,
there were some of those moments where he just kind of relies on zany Jim Carrey as opposed to doing his more character actor thing, like, you know, the dance scene, or like when he keeps interrupting the General, that kind of stuff. It
mhm.
gave me, you mentioned the Riddler. It gave me a lot of Riddler vibes, and I don't say that as a positive because I do not like his Riddler.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I sort of wondered though if that was meant to make him like some of that was sort of entertaining to me, and then some of it was
Hmm.
sort of annoying, but I think it was only annoying in the way that a good villain can be annoying. Like if I'm
Hmm.
watching a movie and a character is making me angry, like very angry, I have
Hmm.
to step back a little bit and think, are they making me angry because that is what the intent is? And if it is, then I just end up conceding, okay, they're doing a good job at that thing then.
Hmm.
Um and I sort of felt like this Dr. Robotnik, the whole premise behind this character was that they were overcompensating. It felt like this
Hmm.
character is he brags about his superior intellect, but I think really it's all rooted in insecurity, which I think is great for a villain. Like it's a great um, backstory, and
Hmm.
they touch on it just a tiny bit in this movie, enough of a hint uh, of his like childhood trauma. Like he
Hmm.
talks about a childhood bully and stuff. I feel like that's just enough to make us realize, okay, okay, he's not as smart as he says he is, or at least it doesn't justify his evil behavior. Uh, so I sort of was trying to look at it through that frame, or that lens, but the silliness, the over the top silliness, I think I don't know, I kind of liked it.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's because I was just already in the mindset of, okay, this movie is more geared towards children, so I shouldn't be expecting too much.
Hmm.
And maybe I didn't enjoy every joke that he had,
Hmm.
but just overall, I really appreciated it. The thing that made me laugh the most or the hardest was when it was his henchman or
Hmm.
his number two basically asking
Yeah.
if he wanted to make him a vanilla latte or something, and he angrily says, of course I want a vanilla latte, it's delicious. Like I just
I
love the
love the way you make them.
absurdity.
Yeah.
Yes, to me that was perfect.
No, I think there's a lot. I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. I think you're right. The insecurity thing, especially, and I think those are the moments when I think Carrie's performance is really at its strongest.
Mm.
Like when he's kind of demeaning the general, when he's always, and when he's telling when he's telling Tom, he's like, I accomplished everything that more than you will ever accomplish by the time that I was a toddler, and all that kind
Mm.
of stuff. Like that insecurity definitely comes through a lot, and I think it makes it clear that you know yeah, maybe he isn't the smartest guy in on the planet like he claims he is, but he just needs to believe that so much because he has
Yes,
nothing else in his
exactly.
life.
Mhm.
I mean, especially the like when Tom says I was breastfed and he goes, "Oh yeah, throw that in my orphan face," right? That's another
That's good
example of one of
too.
these, these great one-liners. Um
But yeah, the dance
and
thing, when like, the more I think about it, I'm like, "Yeah, I think I zoned out at that part."
Yeah, I think that's the thing.
Mm.
Like those great moments. And I think that's why I say like I'm kind of mixed on his performance cuz overall, I
Mm.
think he gives a really good interpretation of Robotnik. I think it makes sense why this guy is involved in this. The whole government connection makes a lot of sense. His the robots and everything, is an obsession with the robots where he says,
Mm.
what I like about robots is they do what they're told and they don't need to take breaks,
Mm.
they don't need overtime or anything like that. And all that, it tracks very much. This is a guy who just cannot relate to other humans on any level whatsoever. Like
Mm.
even when he's thanking someone for a latte, he can't do it like a normal person does, right?
Yeah.
There's and
And Tom
and the poor henchman, right? He keeps trying so hard. And sorry, you were
Yeah,
gonna
that
say
was
about Tom?
a Oh, I was just going to say, to add to your point, about how Dr. Robotnik can't relate to other people. Tom actually brings that up at the end of the movie, saying, "Well, Sonic is way more human than you will ever be." Um,
Yeah.
which is, yeah, completely fair.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And but yeah, the like you mentioned, like the dance scene and like some of the other zaniness, I think that just it kind of overshadows it. And I guess, Jim Carrey was just kind of having a little fun. It's like this is the first time I'm doing something like this in years. So it seemed like he was
Mm.
just kind of like enjoying like flexing those old, comedy muscles that he hasn't really
Mhm.
used in a long time, actually. I can't remember the last time he had done like one of those
Yeah.
zany type performances. Because he's moved into much more of the sometimes more dramatic, but at least a lot more character focused acting as opposed to early on his career where it was much more like, the rubber faced man, and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
in recent years, I can only think of a series of unfortunate events and The Grinch, where he
mhm,
played like more whimsical characters that are more appealing towards children or geared towards children.
right. And
Mm.
even those were a while back, right? It's like, 15 years ago or so. So it's been a
Mhm. A
while since
long
he's done
time
something
ago.
like that. Yeah. Jeez, I can't believe that. I feel old. Uh,
Same.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But what were some of the moments that really kind of stood out to you in this movie, in general?
Um, I guess I I totally saw what they were going for. Trying to make trying to make Sonic pull at our heartstrings.
Mhm,
Um, and I sort of had mixed feelings about it. I really enjoyed uh, how he immediately sort of took to Tom and his wife and some of the townspeople, including like the crazy old coot who knows Sonic
mhm,
exists, but he can't prove it to anyone. But Sonic sort of just looks at him in a positive way, like he just
mhm,
seems to enjoy everything around him in this new world
mhm,
he's living in. But on the other hand, I couldn't sympathize with him as much as I think the movie wanted me to. There were a
mhm,
lot of very heartfelt moments where he was sad he wouldn't be able to achieve all of the things on his Earth bucket list, and
mhm,
there was like a change in music, and he had like glistening eyes, like he was tearing up, and I just couldn't really relate to that as much. I
Mhm.
acknowledged that this is meant to be a sad moment, but it just didn't really hit me. I think maybe as a kid it might have though. I was
Mhm.
I feel like as a kid I cried at movies a lot more. I feel a little more jaded as an adult. Like I feel like people are gonna hate me for this, but I don't really enjoy watching Pixar movies as much anymore.
Mhm.
Um, I'm just I just it doesn't really hit me like it hits a lot of people. I
Mhm.
sort of tend to be driven more towards foreign films or indie films. Um, that's sort of what sort of impacts me more.
Mhm.
I think if it's predictable, which people are gonna hate me for this, but I think if it's predictable, which I feel like Pixar films kind of are, then
Mhm.
it can't emotionally affect me as much.
Mhm. No, that's fair. That's fair. I think, yeah, I think there's some good points. I don't think anyone's gonna hate you for that. I put forth a lot of unpopular opinions on this show, so I think if they haven't come from me with pitchforks yet, I think you're okay for that one
Uh-huh.
little thing.
Okay.
um,
Feels like a monster though to
no, no, no. But I think the about Sonic though, this is I think it's interesting. We had the opposite reactions to this, where I was a little bit more mixed on
Ah.
Robotnik, where you were much more invested
Ah.
in that, whereas you were a little bit more mixed on like Sonic's melancholy. Whereas me, I was much more
Mm.
invested in that, and I think a big part of it is just a little bit more of the relatability because me, you know, being a foreigner in Japan, I had found a lot
Mm.
of relatability to that outsider aspect. And also that thing about, oh,
Mm.
there's so many things I want to do and I'm not going to be able to do it all. Like
Mm.
there's, a few years back, I'd left Japan to go back to the States for a job offer. And I
Mhm.
had those moments too when it's like, I'm not going to be able to. So I really kind of connected to him with those things.
Mm. That's a good point, though. I can totally see how your experiences would make that more relatable to you. Uh, yeah, I can appreciate that.
Again, I was not expecting to connect as much with Sonic emotionally when I went into this movie. So I think that's another big part of it is just
Mm.
the kind of surprise about, connecting so much with this CGI hedgehog voiced by the guy from Parks and Rec that just really kind of it I was not expecting that at all. I did not go in expect like I my expectations going into this movie were somewhat not necessarily low, but I thought based on the trailers and what some people have been saying, I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
this will be a fun movie. It'll be a good way to kill like 90 minutes. I'll have a good time watching it, and then it'll be one of those things where after it's over, I'll forget about it 10 minutes after it's done, type of
Mm.
thing.
Mm.
And I was kind of impressed with which is why, I didn't even bother going to see it in the theater. I waited until it came on to streaming to
Mhm.
see it. And I was really kind of surprised by how much I really kind of enjoyed it and really related to Sonic's emotional journey in it.
Mm. I mean, I do think it's important that they included that in the first place,
Mhm.
though. Like, we as the audience needed to be able to sympathize or empathize with him, to connect with him on that level, and for us to want him to be on our earth. Like, it's
Mhm.
fun to imagine him like living amongst us and having a good time. It wouldn't be as uh, of an emotional investment if we watched him desperately trying to get back to his own planet.
Mhm.
Uh, it does require more emotional investment to see his desire to live amongst humans and to live on
Mhm.
Earth. So I totally understand why they went in that direction. I don't think they could have gone in the other way, but I think it's more effective this way for sure.
I think so too. I think having him being so because I think the typical way to do this story is just like him trying to get back to his own world and being
Mm,
kind of like you know surprised or maybe disgusted with the stuff he sees on Earth, right? Or kind of like being which is the way. a lot of, or just confused, right? Like, I'm thinking about the
Mhm.
whole fish out of water thing, like especially the
Mhm.
first Thor movie did that a lot, where you know
Mm.
throwing down the glass in the restaurant and going to the pet store and asking for a horse and all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Um, Whereas in this movie, and I think they really did a good job because they really thought, what would it really be like if we took this character, this specific character, and put him in this different setting? How would he react to that? And I thought right from the opening scene, when we go through his whole routine and everything, I thought they just nailed it, right? The whole thing about him like
Mm.
exercising in the washing machine or in
Yeah.
the dryer and reading Flash comics and all that kind of stuff. I thought
Uh-huh.
all of that was perfect. And yeah, the relationships he has with the townspeople, like, I love that moment in the car when Tom goes, "So Crazy Carl was right," and Sonic goes, "Yeah, you should really call him Super Observant Carl."
Yes. Or even at the end when they have that final, showdown with Dr.
Mhm,
Robotnik, and all of a sudden, the sheriff deputy is there, and Crazy Carl is there, and he's
mhm.
got a chainsaw because he's ready to defend Sonic too. That was such a cute moment to me.
You know what? It's funny that that scene worked for me as well as it did, because usually when I see moments in that in movies, it almost, and this is the cynic in me. This is the jaded cynic in
Mm,
me. It kind of makes me roll my eyes. Like the whole, I
mm.
remember in throughout the original, the first 5 Spider-Man movies, there was always the New York loves Spider-Man moment, I call it.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, like the first movie, they're on the bridge and they're all throwing stuff at the Goblin. The second movie, it's the whole train scene. The third movie, it's everything, like the opening scene and the flags and the parades. And even in the Amazing Spider-Man, right, there's the crane operators that are and all that kind of stuff. And and I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, I love that moment." And, it was, and I'm just like, for me, I'm just like, I maybe it's because I'm not a New Yorker, but it didn't mean a whole lot to me. It didn't grab me at
Mm.
all. And so usually, and again, this is the cynic in me, usually those scenes do not work for me. This one, surprisingly, it worked for me.
Maybe it's because it was on such a small scale, so it's more believable. Like
Hmm.
this is a couple of people from a small town, so there's probably a closer connection than a city full of
Yeah.
people who know about this superhero character but have
Hmm.
no real connection to, like, no personal connection, not like Sonic literally has with these small town folks.
Right.
Maybe that's possibly why, but I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's probably why. The fact that it's set in a small town. And by the way, I also love the little relation to the game where the town's name is Green Hill, because that was the name of the
That's
first
very
stages in the
cute.
game. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, what about the other thing I thought was really well done is the way they incorporated little things from the video games. Like, because
Mm.
I mean, the whole thing in the video game is you have to catch the rings. That's kind of like your life meter in a way,
Mhm.
and different versions have done different things with the rings. I remember in the ABC version, the ring was kind of like almost like a power up. Like when Sonic used a ring, he got like this extra boost of power. In this, they used it where the ring is this portal type of thing,
Mm.
which also connects to the games because there's the big rings that you jump in for the bonus stages and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
I'm not sure how the comics have done the rings or if they've addressed it at all. How do you what do you remember about how they used it?
I'm actually not sure at all. I When I read the comics, it was so scattered and never like in a sequence. So, to
Okay.
be honest, when I read them, I had no idea what was going on. But I enjoyed them nonetheless. Um, I only played a Sonic game for the first time last year.
Really?
Mm,
So how
that
how
was
did
my
it feel
first time.
after like, experiencing this character from your childhood and playing that first game? How was it?
It's going to take a lot more practice to get the flow of it. It's very different from any kind of game I've played before, but I totally get the appeal of it.
Mhm.
It's so much fun to be in a fast pace like that. Like that's literally like what his character is all about.
Mhm.
Um, Visually, it's really nice. I just really need to play it more to get the hang of it because I don't,
Yeah.
just like the comics. I don't know what the heck is going on, but somehow it's still fun.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I remember I still break them out every now and then. I got a retro gaming system. Every now and then I'll break it out and I'll play like the Sonic games or
Oh,
something like that.
fun.
Yeah, it's great. It's
We
fun.
we were playing it through the Switch because they released an emulator version of it, so you can
Oh
play it
yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
the Nintendo Switch, yeah.
Mhm. Um, and I thought the way they handled the effects and all that, and they had incorporated the little video, like the rings, and but also like his spin
Mm.
dash, and even like the whole
Mm.
thing. Because I'm not sure if you ever realized this in the game, but if you wait for a while, if you don't do anything, right? Sonic starts tapping his foot, he starts checking his watch and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I love how they work that into the
Wow.
the missile scene.
You're totally right.
Mhm.
Yeah. That is very cute. Mm. There were little things like that I'd noticed too, but I'm sure there's a list somewhere where we could see every single little thing that was
Oh yeah,
noticed.
yeah.
Mm.
I'm sure
I
there's a
mean, the
bunch of stuff.
shoes, of course.
Oh yeah, I love. That's another example of a scene that on paper I would have rolled my eyes at that scene, but
Yeah.
it works in this movie, and I think part of it is just the performance Ben Schwartz has given, where this whole kind of melancholy thing, how he so wants a friend, and then he finally finds people who accept him pretty willingly,
Mm.
and I think
Mm.
that's those scenes work so well for me when they happen as a result of that.
Mm. It might also, I wonder if it's as a father, you sort of like see uh Sonic. I mean, he kind of is like a lost kid.
Hmm.
And in a way, Tom and I keep forgetting his wife's name,
Maddie.
Maddie.
Hmm.
Uh, they kind of become surrogate parents to him, which is so cute. And
Hmm.
even Maddie's niece, she's the one who gives him his new shoes
Yeah.
that replaces his totally beat up shoes and socks that had holes in them. That
Hmm.
was such a to be honest, I did roll my eyes a little bit, but at the same time, I was like, actually, that is very sweet.
Hmm. I think you're right about the fatherhood thing playing a role in it for me, because now that I think about it, I think my daughter had been born by the time I first watched this movie. Because because I think if I had seen this before I became a father, I would have had a very different reaction to those scenes.
Mm.
And I have seen that in other movies. Like, again, I use this example all the time. I'm sure the listeners are tired of hearing about it, but the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, when I'm not sure if you ever saw it or not, but the scene when Dennis
I think
Leary's
I've seen all
character,
of them.
Captain Stacy, when he's dying, right, and he's talking to
Mm.
Peter, and he tells him, he's like, "You're going to make enemies, but you're doing good work. But I have one thing to ask: leave Gwen out of it. Don't get her involved. Stay
Mm.
away from her." And before I had kids, my reaction was, why are you doing that to Peter, man? He's just trying to, he's doing the best he can and everything. And now
Yeah.
afterwards, having kids, I'm like, yeah, I kind of get it. I would probably say the same
Yeah.
thing.
It's interesting.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think that definitely does play a role in it. And I mean, the visuals too in this movie were just, not only the Sonic design, but the way they handled his speed and the way they
Mhm.
showcased it, and like the fights with the robots and all that. I thought all of that was just amazingly well done, very well
Mm.
executed.
And I love any film that freezes time and lets
Hmm.
a character play with it. They they really had a lot of fun with that, and that was a lot of fun as a viewer to watch. Um, like I can't think of many movies. I know other movies have done it, but I can't
Hmm.
think of it as any comparisons except the Robert Downey Jr. in the Sherlock Holmes movies. There's some like freeze uh frame sort of time
Right,
stopping moments.
when he's
Yeah.
strategizing how to win the fight and all that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a whole lot of fun. And
What
it's
my
also
mind.
interesting.
Yeah,
I
sorry.
was
Go
just
ahead.
it's just interesting to think about this is kind of like Sonic's reality. Like this
Hmm.
must be how he views the world at all times. We're just getting like a glimpse of it here, which is very strange to think about.
Yeah, I thought my the thing I my go to was X-Men Days of Future Past, the scene with Quicksilver.
Mm.
And I know everybody loves that scene in that movie, but it doesn't quite work for me for a few reasons. I mean, I think it visually it looks great. It does it, but for the one thing, I think the whole him listening to music is weird because logically, if he's moving this fast, he would be finished before the first note of the song even finishes. Um,
Oh, see, I haven't seen that, but that's interesting.
okay,
That's interesting to note.
yeah, because
If I watch that, I'm gonna keep that in mind.
yeah,
Mm.
and so like he puts the headphones on and then he starts racing around, and I'm like, okay, but he doesn't stop time. He's moving in real time here, so that doesn't make sense.
Mm.
So that's just
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
logic brain intruding in, but also just that depiction of Quicksilver in those movies I didn't really like because that's not the Quicksilver I know from the comic books.
Mm.
If you ever saw Avengers: Age of Ultron, Aaron Taylor Johnson,
Mm.
that is Quicksilver from the comics. And so that was just
Okay.
my thing about it. But here, I thought it worked very well because it was very much in tune with Sonic's character. Right?
Mm.
All playing all these little gags on people and all of that totally fit with his character in the games, in other stuff. He's always been like, kind of rambunctious, and this is the kind of the stuff if you gave like a 13-year-old kid superpowers, superhuman speed,
Mhm.
this is the kind of shit he would do. So I totally bought into all of that.
I also show or blah, blah, blah. I also appreciate that it shows that he's clever too. He
Hmm.
is very rambunctious and childlike, but he does have like a strategic mind to a degree because
Yeah.
he's. It looks like he's just randomly setting up every person in this bar for a prank, but by the time he's done doing all of this stuff and we see time go back in motion
Hmm.
again, uh, literally everybody in the bar falls over all at once at the same time because he has rigged some all of this stuff so that everybody is affected by this little trap
Hmm.
of his. It's a lot of fun.
Well, also, going with the way he perceives the world too. I think they
Mm.
show that not only through those scenes, but also like when he's in the car with Tom, and he's like, "How long is it going to take for us to get there?" And he's like, "We just started driving." And but for someone like that who he can move at superhuman speed, you
uh-huh.
know, like I mean, you probably know being stuck in traffic or something like that. It's like, oh god damn, how long is this going to take? Like
Mhm.
any sort of minor inconvenience that slows you down, it is an annoyance, and they do it. There are two ways to play that. One way you can play it as someone who gets really super annoyed with everything, or you can just
Mm.
play it as someone who just gets annoying because he gets bored very easily. And I thought that
Yeah.
really fits the way they did it with Sonic.
Mm. Yeah,
And also
totally.
that fits in the whole kids thing because the whole "Are we there yet" thing.
Are we there yet?
Yeah, yeah. um, those are kind of the main things I'd wanted to mention. Was there anything else that you had? Because I know you had some notes, general notes. You said anything else that we didn't touch on that you wanted to comment on?
um yeah. So when I was on a podcast a few years back, talking about the the influences on my comic,
Hmm.
and it was only sort of then that I realized that Sonic the Hedgehog could have been an influence. But I didn't realize it for a long time. And one of the things that made me remember is in the eighth grade. All my life, I grew up drawing.
Hmm.
And I came from a small town, so literally everybody knew me for that. By the time I was in the eighth grade, they asked me to draw the yearbook cover, and our mascot was a tiger.
Hmm.
So when I drew it, I literally drew it as if it were a Sonic the Hedgehog character with the sort of uni eyeball, the single
Hmm.
eyeball with two pupils, um, and totally forgot about it. So that was sort of like physical evidence of how much Sonic the Hedgehog influenced me.
Hmm.
So that was a lot of fun to realize.
Nice, nice. And also, have you seen the second movie yet?
I haven't, but I know that people are very, very thirsty for gosh, what's his name? The echidna.
Oh, Idris Elba.
Knife. Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah,
People are
Knuckles. Yeah,
so
Knuckles. Yeah,
thirsty.
yeah, yeah.
Knuckles. I was gonna say Knives. Who is Knives? Knuckles. People are so thirsty for him.
Hmm.
But I'm sure
I remember that
that one
chatter
takes.
on the internet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that one, I believe, takes place like in their world, right?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen it myself. That's why I was just because I was thinking about it last night. Because I'm like, wait, that movie is out on DVD now. I haven't even seen it yet. So I was actually
Mm.
looking it up at the because I haven't seen any of the streaming services here in Japan, but we still have rental stores. So I was looking it up on the rental store app, and it is there. So I'm gonna have to go and pick that up next time I go out to the rental store. Um,
Yeah, I might too.
yeah, I mean but yeah, I mean this movie it was surprising how much I enjoyed it after I saw it on streaming. When I was back in the States, I saw I think it was the Blu-ray for like, $2. So I picked it up, at a used store, and definitely don't regret that purchase. I think I've watched it,
Yeah, that's a good
once
deal.
when I first got it and then again just last night. So I've watched it twice since then, so it's already paid for itself.
That's
um
great.
but yeah, this is a fun movie. And like you mentioned, with my kids, I could easily see this being something that they would enjoy. And when they get a little bit older, I think this is something that they would sit down and they'd like watching.
Mm. And something that you can watch with them and won't go crazy with.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because right now my daughter is getting kind of into Teletubbies, and those things are just creepy as hell.
I don't have kids, but I think about that all the time.
Yeah,
Like my
I mean,
partner and I, we talk about that. Like, okay, we got to have a game plan. When we have kids, we're gonna push all of these things onto them, all these things
mhm.
that we know we like too. So maybe we won't go crazy.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I'm trying to do that, but at this point, she's still too young to really take too much of it. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like she uses YouTube a lot, and there's this one YouTube series called Blippy, and it's like this. I don't know if you know this, but it's this like this adult guy, but he dresses in like these colorful clothes, and he's got like all this energy, and just goes around to these different places, like exploring things and all that.
Hmm.
And it's just like the guy's so freaking annoying. Like every time I hear his voice, it's just like nails on a chalkboard.
Oh no.
But she loves it, so she plays it all the time.
Right, right. The
um,
sacrifices that you must make for your children.
yeah, yeah. uh, anyway, Lindsay, it was a lot of fun having you on. A lot of fun talking about Sonic. You had mentioned ratings before at the beginning of this. So what do you think overall you would kind of give this movie if you were going to rate it on, say, like a 5 or 10 star scale?
Ooh, interesting. Well, the way that we do ratings on my podcast is we rate out of 10, and then
Hmm.
we each individually choose uh the stars that we rate with.
Hmm.
Um so for me, I think I would comfortably give it 6.5 out of 10 chili dogs.
Okay, it's a nice rating scale. I've rated this on. I use Letterbox a lot, and Letterbox, they've got the 5 star system with the half star. So I
Mm.
I think I gave this a 4 star rating on Letterbox. So that would be probably like about an 8 maybe if we were doing a 10 point
Hey, that's
scale.
good.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think maybe might knock it down to 7, 7.5, but I think.
Mm.
But yeah, 3.5 for 7.58. I think that's about where I'd put it. I mean, it's very enjoyable. It's not like the greatest movie ever, but it's an endlessly rewatchable movie. I can see myself rewatching this movie a
Yeah.
lot and not getting annoyed with it.
That's fair. Okay, you've convinced me. I'm gonna give it 7 out of 10 chili dogs.
Okay. All right. So last thing is, why don't you tell people where they can find your stuff?
Absolutely. And if it actually makes more sense for you, you can take what we did earlier and put it at the end, if that functionally makes more sense. Uh, but just in case, you can find my comic Oni Girl on Webtoon Canvas. If you just search ONIGIRL, you'll be able to find it. You can read up to chapter 4. You'll notice that the earlier pages are in black and white. That's because I used to draw them traditionally with ink on
Hmm.
paper. And for the first few pages, I used real screen tones. Um, I really quickly learned that is very unpractical and expensive, so I stopped doing that.
And time consuming too, I'd
Eventually,
imagine.
and time consuming. Yes, oh my gosh. But I am in the process of updating the artwork, making it nicer, and I'm coloring all of the pages.
Hmm.
But uh, as you, as a fellow comic artist, know, creating comics is incredibly time consuming.
Hmm.
And uh, So people, if they would like to support the production and the printing of the first chapter in color, they can find that on Kickstarter until February 14th. If they just search Oni Girl, they'll be able to find it. Again, that's ONIGIRL. And yeah, I would appreciate the support, and I hope you enjoy reading it.
Great, and we'll have links to both the webtoons and the Kickstarter in the show notes. So you guys will be able to check all that stuff out. Lyndsey, thanks so much for coming on. This is a fun conversation, and have to have you come on again sometime.
Absolutely, I would love to.
Okay, that does it for this episode of Superhero Cinephiles. SuperheroCinephiles.com is the website. We are Super Cinema Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And if you sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com, Super Cinema Pod, you get these episodes a week in advance, and you also get access to the Patreon exclusive Superhero Cinephiles Book Club, where we talk about comics and graphic novels roughly about once a month or so. Thanks so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time. If you enjoy the Superhero Cinephiles, then you'll also love my companion podcast, the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club. All my Patreon subscribers get access to this exclusive podcast where I review superhero comics and graphic novels. Not sure what comics you want to read next or what you should dive into? I've got you covered on that. I'll be doing reviews, recommendations, and also talking to you about useful entry points if you're interested in reading some comics but don't know where you should start. Plus, you'll get access to all episodes of the main show a week before everyone else. On all of this for as little as just $1 a month. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/supercinemapod and you can sign up at any subscription amount to get started. Thanks so much for your support, and please don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.